All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of LandO's Lock-ins, the series in which we do our darndest, our best to try to make the most accurate CDL pick'em predictions possible. I welcome you to what is going to be an incredible final split of the Vanguard season of the 2022 CDL season. This year has been crazy. It has been wild, multiple victors, multiple surprises, and now we've had a crazy roster mania period in preparation in most teams just trying to sprint their best to the finish, even if that means replacing half of the roster. It is going to be a fun first week of matches, though. If you are just joining us for the first time, this is the series, as we just talked about, where we do our pick'em predictions. We go over each match, we talk about where the teams sit, how they match up against each other, and ultimately I give my pick and prediction and do my best to try to make this record that sits below you look much better than it does right now. 76 and 66, are you serious? Like, come on. This is horrible. This is horrible. I'll be honest, there'd be quite a few more W's if Atlanta FaZe was closing out finals. No shade trying to be tossed toward the Atlanta FaZe side. I'm just talking in general, but my goodness, man, what a setup of games that we have got. What a slate of matches, as you can see here. Wonderful slate of games. So let's go ahead and get into it, right? I mean, like I said, my record's not good, so I'm trying to like be realistic, but at the same time, I'm also going to throw up some surprises. I'm gonna surprise you today. That is my goal, is to catch you off guard with a few of our predictions. And one thing too that's also important to mention, right, this is the final stretch. There is a crazy bubble brewing right now, and really in the middle to bottom half of our CDL teams right now. I'd say a good 6 to 7 teams sit and wait on possibly making it to the top 8 versus falling out of the top 8. So this is going to be a very fun conversation. As we said, roster mania funnels into a lot of these teams as well. We've got a number of different roster changes that we will touch on, and that segues us perfectly into our very first game of Friday, arguably one of the most important games in this entire split. New York versus Florida, the Subliners taking on the Mutineers. This is a huge matchup off the rip. I love the way that we are starting off the fourth split. And honestly, it just expresses perfectly really what this split is all about. It is about trying to get the champs. Granted, our team's trying to win the championship of Major 4. Of course they are. But the overlying topic, and like I said, the final sprint that everybody's trying to make, is to try to make sure that they are into that top 8. So if you're sitting pretty, if you're like the first 3, seeds, you're sitting great. If you've been playing well lately and you're sitting in a good spot, that's wonderful. However, that is not the way that most of the teams in the CDL are feeling right now, especially New York and Florida, who as of this moment do sit out of the top 8. Florida right now does have a decent seed, right? They sit right now in the 10th spot. New York, points-wise, sits very far down in the 11th spot. We'll talk about New York first, right? I mean, I feel like the spotlight is on them. The spotlight is on the Subliners, arguably more than any other team right now in the bottom 4, because there's a lot of people talk about how Minnesota absolutely can make it. Florida definitely has a chance to make it. Paris are pretty much out of the question right now. And then really, is it possible for New York? We've talked in great length about really what New York's path is. Again, you guys can feel free to check out that video on the channel. I went so in depth. This is the last chance to check it out. I went incredibly in depth with what the path looks like for the Subliners. So if you want to see a more in-depth look at that, I talk about it there. Essentially, this is a must-win for New York. Put it simple. With the games that they have coming up, with you just expect that a more difficult team down the line that they're going to have to face off against. You need to take down this Florida team. You need to take down Florida. You need to get this W. And for the Subliners, it feels like they shouldn't even be in this position. I mean, a team that won on LAN in the Pro-Am has not got any points. They've gotten 0 points so far in any of our major lanes. Major 1, 0 points, top 12. Same thing for Major 2, and same thing in our most recent Major 3. It's not going to be an easy run for them. As we said, they've really put themselves in a pretty big hole. That first series versus Seattle looked like they were going to be in a great spot. They made the comeback, winning back-to-back games, sending us to a game 5. They were up 5-3, and they lost it. They lost it versus Seattle, obviously the team that would go on to win the tournament. Imagine, right, if that goes New York's way. Maybe New York is the team that makes a decent run, faces off against Atlanta FaZe in that winner's final. Who knows? Maybe things could have been different. But ultimately, the thing that I look at for New York is going to be the search destroys. I mean, whenever they did make their run at Pro-Am, it was all because of the search and destroys. Great hardpoint team working on control, getting that to be better. S&Ds were excellent because they were clutching up in round 11. Now, something interesting about New York is that 10 of their last 17 search destroys have ended in around 11. 2 of their 3 losses when it came down to Major 3 and search destroy were in round 11. So it's like they're just not winning them currently. They're not winning them lately. And then ultimately in Major 3, it felt like Hydra and Paul were great. Crim and Kismet were not, especially like I said, at Major 3, at Toronto specifically. So they're gonna have to work on just really overall consistency as a lineup and just getting better at S&D. On the other side for Florida, okay, this team has been in the conversation. They have been in the rumor mill quite a bit off of a top 6 placement at Major 3. They beat OpTic, which was great for them. They continue their streak, it feels like, versus that team on LAN. Later would lose to Seattle and fall to Toronto. But for Florida, I like the change though. Like, I do like the decision that the Mutineers make. They decide to go ahead and drop Vivid and Dave Patty and bring in 2 new players to the lineup. Major Maniac, who's previously a part of the Minnesota Røkkr, as well as a new rookie known as 2Real. So they will be filling Dave Patty and Vivid's position. Ultimately, not surprised we see Florida make a move, but I am surprised that it is this big of a move, which to me just kind of goes to show the importance that Florida feels right now. They feel like they have got a real shot. And I don't want to say it shows their desperation, but it shows their intensity for what could be a top 8 finish, a chance to go to champs and maybe make a run, because I think like a majority of their points have come from surprise victories on LAN. So again, when they get to that environment, they're just so much better. They are incredibly talented. So far for Florida at every single major qualifier, they have always finished 2 and 3. They're going to definitely need to improve on that a little bit. When it comes down to this matchup, again, I think the primary thing is going to be S&D. That's going to be the talking point of this series. I can tell you because I'm casting it. Because New York Subliners, as we talked about, search destroy has been a topic of conversation. They must win this game, plain and simple. For Florida, obviously a little bit more wiggle room. You still want to walk away with this. Arguably, you could talk about how it is a very necessary W for Florida to take. I feel like this Florida team gets better at search destroy instantly by bringing in Major Maniac. I feel like the pace essentially is brought to a more consistent level. Obviously, you lose Vivid, but you do lose Dave Patty at the same time, arguably the fastest and the slowest player in the league. You now have more of an identity. So I like Florida more than I did prior to this change. However, it is still a new team, which could be a positive. It could be a negative. It feels like in Vanguard, it's overwhelmingly going to be a positive because you bring in a new player, you instantly see success. It feels like the honeymoon period in Vanguard is incredibly severe. I like New York more than the hard points. S&D to me is going to be a toss-up. Again, a new Florida team. And I like that Florida do have, like I said, some new players to work out, like in the space. Control is going to be big. However, I am going to go with the New York Subliners simply from the fact that New York has the sense of urgency. We must win this game. We have to win this game. I mean, if you start off 0-1, when everybody is talking about how you have to go perfect, they don't have to be perfect. They just need a 4-1, 3-2 record at bare minimum. And then we can talk about LAN stuff later. But you cannot start off by going 0-1, losing to a new team like Florida, losing to a team that you are supposed to beat, who now makes a recent roster change. You just can't afford to have it happen. And I think that New York, with that sense of urgency, will be able to take them down. I'm going to say 3-2, 3-1. I just feel like the Subliners are going to be on top of their game when it comes down to this matchup. I feel like they're focused, they're ready, and the awareness is there. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Subliners to take this. And I hope, right, that Florida does end up turning things around because they've got a big matchup again versus Minnesota, the team that sits just above them right now in the standings. We'll move on to Boston Breach versus OpTic Texas. An interesting one, given that, a week ago, we probably thought 2 players were going to be in this series. However, it is not the case. iLLeY and Capsule will not be playing. iLLeY is going to be substituted out again for Prolute. I'm sure you've seen it. If not, well, there is the news for you. In the nearby future, Prolute is still going to be playing in place of iLLeY. Not a ton of updates in terms of how long that's going to last. Is it going to be all of Major 4? Is it going to be half? Is Prolute playing for champs? I'm sure that is something that OpTic Texas are thinking about, but not trying to overthink about right now. Boston Breach, we'll talk about them first. Right now I have the number 6 seed and off of a top 12 placement at the Toronto Major. They got 3-0'd by Minnesota. They've only won one match in the entirety of Major 3, which was a 3-1 versus London, where they full sailed them and search destroy. You could argue 90% of the time, 99% of the time. I mean, what? How often does a full sail happen? They go down 2-0 in that series and they probably lose it. Boston, off of a full sail search destroy momentum shift, that was the one W that they got. But they did make a roster change. As I said, Capsule no longer in the lineup. The rookie is out of the picture. And they're bringing in Vivid. We just talked about Florida. Vivid goes from the Mutineers instantly over to the Boston Breach. Now, I liked a majority of the moves that we saw teams make throughout this period. I mean, the moves that we saw Paris make, the moves that we saw Florida make. I like the decisions that teams are making, right? The Boston one, I think, has a good element to it. It's just from an on-paper perspective, it does worry me a tad bit because it feels like Boston did remove Capsule from the lineup just because of his lack of damage output, from the lack of pace that he was providing. It felt like he got slower and slower. He was even playing slower in terms of engagements than Methodz was. So you're wanting to see an SMG that can speed things up a little. The thing is that Boston is not just bringing in a fast SMG, they're bringing in the fastest SMG to the team, alongside somebody who I think is excellent, Nero. You're going to have two guys who are just absolutely chaotic around the map, who are going to be problems to deal with. At the same time, also have that inconsistent side as well. So I don't know. It feels like for Boston, that's something that I'm a tad worried about. Is I felt like the pace was already off, and now it feels like you may have the fastest 2 SMGs in the league, along with 2 ARs who are great, but by no means are known to be incredibly fast-paced either. So I don't know. It's an interesting situation to be in. At the same time, Boston, known for, you know, when they were making their runs, when they were a great team back at the start of the season, it was through the search destroys, right? They were able to bring their respawns up to a considerable level, along with being a phenomenal search destroy team. Now you're removing what is the number 9 KD in search destroy in Capsule, who has a 1.19 in the entirety of Vanguard, and replacing him with Vivid, who is the number 58 KD in search destroy, a 0.78 in comparison to a 1.19. So I don't know. It's a difficult spot for Boston to be in. I do applaud them for the roster change. I just don't know if Vivid was the right player to bring in. Considering that, again, I feel like your pace is going to instantly speed up. SBs are going to get way faster. Is that a good thing? Who knows? And then at the same time, Search Destroy, which has been their bread and butter, you no longer have your guy who has been the player for you as of lately. And Methodz and TJ were not good. 0.6 and 0.7s in S&D throughout Major 3, the entirety of Major 3 for Search and Destroy. So, again, Boston, not an easy move to make, one that I'm not the biggest fan of, and on top of that, they've got the most difficult schedule, I think, out of almost every single team in the CDL right now. I mean, being number 6 is great, right, in terms of seeding, but they've got OpTic to play, then they've got LAT, then they have Seattle, LAG, and Toronto. I mean, you have 4 teams who looked excellent at the most recent major. OpTic obviously not at their full peak, but you don't want to play OpTic at any point, right? The only questionable series is versus the Guerrillas, and it feels like that could be really the only opportunity for Boston to get points. I mean, unless they take down this OpTic Texas team, which I don't think is going to happen. We'll transfer to OpTic Texas right off the top 6 at Major 3. They hold the number 2 seed right now in the CDL. They're not going to go anywhere. Off of losses to Florida, and then they literally lose to LA Thieves. Kenny was a man on fire in that series. And then, you have the move. You have the decision where it's like, okay, LA's going to be playing. Now it's Prolute again. I talked about this in my rankings video. If you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend you do so. Talk about all the roster changes more in depth and talk about where I rank all teams moving into Major 4 right now. And I put OpTic a little higher than I think some people would have expected. And the reason for that is, even though Prolute is going to be back and in place of Illy, it feels like, well, this is an annoying pivot, it could be something good for OpTic Texas, because they weren't practicing a ton with Illy in the first place. I mean, we saw the clips. Scump was talking about how, we're trying to be careful with it. We want to make sure that he is just able to play in general. Even if that means we're playing one scrim a day, that's the sacrifice we're willing to make for our teammate, which is incredibly admirable. However, the scrims are going to turn up. They also, to me, now that we're in Major 4, I think it's a different mentality even for a team like OpTic Texas, because they would always have on their mind, if they were playing with iLLeY, well, are we actually losing this series? Like, the map that we just lost here, maybe even the series that we lost. I mean, hey, if iLLeY's at 100%, which he will be hopefully, in 2 weeks from now, we're going to win that series for the future. It almost feels like OpTic would not actually be playing with the real lineup if iLLeY is not at his 100%. Plus, they're not going to be scrimmaging as much if he's not at 100%. So I feel like this is overall going to be a better move in the long run for OpTic, and especially for iLLeY, which I hope he gets better soon, without question. One of my favorite players to watch in the entirety of the league. And like I said, it just feels like if they were playing with him, if he's not at 100% or still, trying to be really careful with the injury, they'd be wondering, like, was it a true loss that we just had, or is it because of the injury? And I expect OpTic to just say, you know what, we're going to stop talking about this. We're going to stop focusing on this. When Ender gets back, great, that's fine. But we're putting everything to the side and we're acting as if this is our 4-man lineup for the future. Like, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. But I think for OpTic's sake, you literally just go into these first few matches, you go into the start of Major 4, just like, okay, these are our guys. Like, these are our guys. There's no more like, okay, when iLLeY gets back, we'll do this. When iLLeY gets back, we do that. Not happening anymore. And so I feel like this is going to be an OpTic Texas team that a lot of people are talking about. Maybe they've already reached their peak. Maybe that we've seen the ceiling with OpTic, which is top 6, maybe top 4. I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think this is going to be an OpTic team that has reached their peak yet. I think they have the ability to go that much farther, all things considered. When we talk about the predictions of this series, I'm going to go with OpTic Texas, but do we give a map to Boston with the new team? I think there's a chance for it. What game mode is it? I really have no idea. I'll be honest. I think it's a 3-1 or 3-0. Now that I'm thinking about it, like, I like OpTic more in the hard point. Search Destroy, just talked about how I don't like Boston right now in S&D, but maybe they take one. I don't think I give them anything. I really don't. I don't think I can, like, really, in my mind, justify giving Boston a map, just given the team that they've got and given the positivity I gave one side versus the negativity on the other. I think we go OpTic 3-0 and we just move on, which is unfortunate because I like my Boston Breach boys. It is what it is. LAG versus Toronto. Let's talk about the last game of Friday. This should be a fun one. LAG, obviously off of a roster change. They've got the number 7 seed right now. They have gone 1-8. 1-8 in series since they won the Major 2. Obviously, it makes sense. It makes sense that you make a move. They are in dangerous territory. Arguably the go-to team to fall out of the top 8 right now for most teams. Like, if you are Minnesota, if you're a New York, if you're a Florida, you're looking at yourself to be like, okay, LAG surely is going to fall. Who's going to fall along with him? Is it going to be Boston? Could it be London? Could it be, et cetera, et cetera? LAG is looked upon as the team that very well could start to falter more than anybody else. But they did make a huge move. Much like Florida, LAG decided, hey, we're replacing half the team. We are getting rid of half the team. And we're starting, I don't want to say like totally fresh because they bring back in Spart for Gunless. However, they did bring in Neptune in place of Asim. Now, I feel bad, obviously, for Gunless and Asim to be replaced. Gunless has had, those problems. He was the star player for them, their best player, most consistent player on the team before he did, unfortunately, have his leave of absence. On the other side for Asim, I know he hasn't had the easiest, feels like the last, 12 months, plus, and then did not play well. Most recently in the Major 3, it's been hard to call him, the go-to guy, the X factor, the engine for the team when he was just not at his best. So it makes sense. However, with the move that LAG make, in my eyes, it just puts a dramatic focus on the SMGs. It puts a dramatic focus on the submachine guns because we know what Spart and what Slasher are going to do, right? They've teamed together before. They won a championship at Major 2. We've seen Spart in this lineup before. Did not have a good run with this team online, whenever he did return with them after the Major 2W. I expect Spart to be better. And I also might expect LAG to be better. I don't know. It's it's a weird situation right now for the Guerrillas, because I think that not only are you, like, if you were to talk about Spart and Neptune a few months ago, people would talk about, oh, you know, Spart only good with the Volk, you know, is a good SMG or a good S&D player, but that's really about it. On the other side for Neptune, right, stock has never been lower, right? This guy doesn't know how to play, doesn't know how to play his life, you know, very slow SMG, doesn't really know his role. Now it feels like after they're running challengers, the stock is high. Like, the stock is high. Spart, who's been playing with Clay, nothing but praise. Nothing but praise. It feels like Spart kind of legitimized to the Guerrillas, like, hey, I was not the right guy to get rid of. I was not the player that should have been kicked off of the team. And then everything that I keep hearing from everybody in challengers is talk about how Neptune, it's a redemption moment for him, and he's gotten so much better at fixing the issues that he had with the Subliners, playing his life, decision making, all the things that you want to see an SMG improve on. It feels like he is improving on those things. So I think that LG, while they are definitely not in a safe place, very well could see one of the more impressive upgrades, or could have one of the better turnarounds right now in the CDL if the SMG core of Neptune and Hook work together well. Again, two guys who are not known to communicate a ton, two guys who can be inconsistent, but at the same time, when we've seen Neptune at his best, we've seen Hook at his best, and they are unbelievable when they're at that level. So who knows? Maybe the Halo connection is there. Maybe there's just something that connects at the same time, along with improving in the S&Ds and having a solid AR core back together as well. So we'll see how that goes. On the other side for Toronto, the number 5 seed, considered again to be a top 4, top 3 team right now in the CDL, off the 3rd place finish at their own major. And it feels like Toronto is back. I love it. I love it. I'll tell you what, man, Toronto was one of my favorite teams to watch in Cold War. And just a group of 4 of them. Whenever you think about one player, you instantly think about the other 3. It's just the way that Toronto plays. It's just the way that the way their play style works. It's just fun. It's just fun to watch Toronto. It's intriguing to watch how the team ticks, how they work. And you know, a team that at one point was like 2-18 in hardpoint, that went 13-6 in hardpoint at Major 3. They had a 10-game winning streak in S&D throughout Major 3. It feels like they got their swagger back, but was that Toronto's peak? Like, have we seen enough out of the Ultra to say with 100%, like, hey, this is a team that compete for championships? You know, we finally saw them look somewhat human when they faced off against the Atlanta FaZe, still went to a game 5. But it's just an interesting conversation to have. Like, is Toronto only going to get better? Is Toronto going to stay stagnant? Or did they finally like hit that peak at their own major? Crowd is rooting them on. They finally showed everybody like, hey, no, we are not a bottom tier team in the league. We can win hard points. We can be consistent. We can slay. I don't know. It's really, to me, one of the more interesting storylines to watch right now in the CDL is Toronto's rise, because it feels like they could compete for championships right now. And we talk about this series, obviously, because Toronto doesn't make any moves, so not a whole lot to talk about Toronto. It's just like, hey, yay, Toronto's back, awesome. But when we talk about this series, I think LAG could definitely be a threat, without a doubt, especially in the Search Destroys. As I said, much like the Florida team, feels like the S&Ds have got better. It's going to be difficult to know exactly how this roster is going to play. So that will be something Toronto's going to have to figure out. So they're going to have to point out, etc. I think the SMGs, again, are going to be the focus, the topic of discussion for this series, given the fact that, this is an excellent opportunity for Hook and Neptune to show out, like to show off. If LAG instantly drops, you're like, okay, well, maybe this LAG thing doesn't work out. I think that LAG just needs to have a solid performance versus one of the best teams that we have right now in the league. How good is it going to be? I really don't know. I'm still going to give Toronto the victory, but I think this does go to a game 5. Again, I am very eager to see the Guerrillas. I think with this new team, it's just a totally different look that Toronto are going to have to work out. And I just think the Search Destroyers are going to be much better from the Guerrillas. I think we could see them steal a hardpoint, steal a respawn, especially if Neptune comes out of the gates hot, which, like I said, I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about Neptune lately. It's possible. We will see. But I do have Toronto taking that series, but I think that it has a chance to go to a game 5. So we got a 3-1, 3-0, 3-2, all the way across the board. We're seeing every kind of result, and we'll see if those predictions do reign true. All right, we'll move on to our next one. It is the Battle of Europe. Not London versus Paris, but instead London versus Toronto. the actual Battle of Europe, considering the players on either side. We obviously already talked about Toronto. We'll talk about London right now. A big series ultimately for London, considering their spot right now in the standings. They have the number 4 seed. They're still feeling pretty good, but you can't get too comfortable. Obviously, if you are the Royal Ravens, they're bringing back in Gizmo for Harry, so that is something to definitely think about, without question, right? I mean, the runs that they had with Gizmo, way better. Whenever we saw Gizmo leave the team, moving into the Pro-Am, 3-7 in total series, 4-12 in hardpoint without Gizmo, with Harry in the lineup. And I don't necessarily think it was an issue with Harry. I think it just wasn't the right fit for the team. Like, I feel like the discussions that people were having talk about how this team is a little bit too slow. You got 2 ARs who are basically main ARs. I feel like that was kind of the case. They really started to lose their swagger at hardpoint. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the pace of the team. I do. I think a lot of it comes down to the pace. It felt like at times, like, it just feels like London went from one of the more interesting teams in the CDL to just gone. Like, it feels like they vanished in Major 3 and at the Pro-Am as well. Like, we were talking about how, Afro could be one of the best players in the league. Poof. Conversation's gone. You like that? Poof. They instantly left. I don't know what happened to him. But I'm hoping that London do return to form. It is scary, right? Because when you do get rid of a player and you bring him right back in, it's like, what happens if this doesn't work? Like, it almost feels like nobody's really thinking about that. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to get better. But what happens if you don't? You know what I'm saying? Like, if they bring in Gizmo back and let's say that they are just bad, like they get 3-0'd by Toronto not out of the tournament, but they close out their first week, just a 3-0 loss. What happens then? I don't know. It's, I think there was a lot on the line for London in this first series. So much so that I think that there could be an upset potentially in this one. Not to say that Toronto's not going to be playing well. It's just that I think London do have somewhat of a sense of urgency right now with the team. I think ultimately for London, you're just looking to get at least 2 victories. I think 2 victories, 3 could be stretching it, but you'd feel incredibly confident if you got 3 wins in the qualifiers. If you get 2, I think you're still good as long as you have a decent placement when it comes down to the major. So I think really for London, it's not necessarily about, it's not like the Boston or the LAGs. It's more about like, hey, let's just focus on our game. Let's focus to getting back to where we were, even if that may take us a series or 2 to figure out. Like, we don't have to worry about like, we've got to beat this team. If we don't beat this team, then, we were in such a difficult situation. It's not really like that for London, I don't think. Now, we talk about predictions for this series. It is going to be interesting because Toronto are having a back-to-back, one of, I think, 3 or 4 back-to-backs that we've seen this season. I actually really do need to take a look back and see how, like, does that help teams? Like, are they really good in back-to-back situations? But I think for Toronto, these are not going to be easy games. Again, you're facing off against 2 new rosters. Obviously, we've seen Gizmo previously, but is there a chance? Like, I think that there definitely could be. With the London Royal Ravens, I think they could give it their best shot. It wouldn't surprise me if London come out of the gates and just look excellent versus this Toronto team. I've wanted to call this London's game, honestly. I've been thinking about it for a while. I know I was going to surprise you guys, but I think it's going to be a 3-1 for Toronto. I don't know. It's a hard call to make. This might be one that I revisit depending on Toronto's performance. Now, I know I have them going to a game 5 versus LAG. However, if LAG wins this one makes me a lot more worried for Toronto. On the other side, I'm really going to be looking at like player performance. Is it LAG catching them off guard? Is it Toronto making mistakes? I don't know. I think there is something to look at for this one. This would be one that I would circle if you are interested in trying to pull off some crazy upsets or, maybe shock your friends. But I'm interested in this one. I think it will be a Toronto W, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if the new look London Royal Ravens make some noise. I don't know. It's possible. We'll move on to the LA Guerrillas facing off against the New York Subliners. This is going to be a fun matchup. This is a huge series between the bubble teams. This is Neptune versus his old team as well. So that is something to think about. By the way, my bad. I totally forgot about this. London versus Toronto. That will also decide who has the 4th versus 5th seed, by the way. Meant to talk about that. Did not get to it, but whoever wins that game, if Toronto does beat LAG, then that matchup decides who has the 4th, 1st, and 5th seed. So I wanted to talk about that. We will move on though. Bubble teams, LIG yet to get any points, especially if they lose to Toronto. This would be a scary loss already if you are the Guerrillas, right? If you were to lose to Toronto, lose to New York, you're down 0-2 off rip. If we're talking about winners bracket, which could be what this team relies upon, LAG could be looking at and saying, hey, we need to have those 3 W's. We need to have that winners bracket position just to make sure that we've got those 2 lives. Because you know what? Hey, let's say the LAG goes, they happen to get at least 3 W's. They make it to round 1, and they win that first game. That's what, 20 points guaranteed on top of 3 wins that you had in the qualifiers. That's 50 points right there, and that is arguably top 8. If they're able to accomplish that. So this is already a huge game for LAG. We talked about it already. Another must win for New York. I mean, when it comes down to their schedule, let me actually take a look at New York's schedule, because I wanted to highlight the importance of this one, because as I talked about, they need to go 4-1. Obviously 5-0 is great. 3-2 is less than acceptable. But if you are New York, so like I said, they do have Florida first, LAG, Seattle, OpTic, LA Thieves. So that I forgot exactly who they had to face off against. So I don't want to say these are like must wins, but these are absolutely must wins. I mean, you got Seattle up next, very well could lose that. OpTic after that, very well could lose that. And LA Thieves, who knows? Like, who honestly knows with the LA Thieves at this moment? Like, what team we're going to see when it comes down to that matchup. So again, I think this is another sense of urgency type of matchup for the Subliners. I have them as 1-0 right now after the W versus Florida. If not, Subliners lose that series. This loss could instantly put NYSL basically out of contention. So that is something to think about. If Florida do come through, beat New York, this match is basically it, honestly. If LAG beat them, it's probably their season right there, which could be a fun moment if you're Neptune facing off against your old team. This is going to be a great matchup to watch, a really fun one, considering the rivalry that is absolutely brewed between Crim and Neptune, and really just the entirety of the team. Obviously the slander that he received, it felt like he, I don't know, like we've all seen the clips, like Crim going back and forth with Neptune, them talking about, each other's play styles. Neptune's crazy, Crim is an idiot, back and forth. It's going to be a great game. I think from a rivalry standpoint, this is going to be a fun one to watch. But ultimately, I think that LAG give it their best shot. I just think, again, New York come out swinging. I do. I think that New York come out swinging. I think that they're incredibly motivated to walk away with this game. I've not been doing enough 3-0s lately, and I think New York take care of them in 3. I do. I think they're going to be feeling good after that Florida W. And when it comes down to this game, I just don't see a way that they lose. I don't see a way that they lose. I mean, LAG could attack them in the search destroys, but I like New York more in the respawns, and even maybe in the search destroys, you might like New York, like 60-40 possibly. And then if it goes to round 11, who really knows with the Subliners? I just think that New York are going to be very well prepared for this series, and they're going to be motivated to make sure that they don't lose to somebody like Neptune. So we will advance forward. New York go 2-0, sweat off the brow a little bit, at least for the time, if you're a New York fan, because you have 3 gauntlet games coming up in week 2 and week number 3. Minnesota versus OpTic. This is double points, baby. Double points. A game fuel marquee matchup. This is a big game, especially for Minnesota, who right now have the 9th seed, 10 points away from top 8. This is a really weak right now for Minnesota. Considering they have 2 games. They have OpTic on Saturday and Florida on Sunday. Another huge series when we talk about just in general, where teams sit right now. Minnesota, they need to have a good start, especially if they can break into the top 8. Off the poor placement at Major 3, top 8 after going 0-5 in qualifying matches. They go 15-3 in overall maps. Their opening series, they lose to LA Thieves. Both those search destroyers combined, they go 3-12 in round count on their best maps. They go 3-12 in total round count across those 2 games. You just can't afford to have lapses like that. I mean, a team that looked flawless in search destroy, flawless in control, You can't afford to lose ones like that. I know they didn't lose. I mean, they didn't win every single search destroy. I'm just saying in general, like their SD was looking magnificent. And that really screwed their tournament to me. Like Minnesota, their loss to LA Thieves totally put them in a hole. You know, they'd go on to beat Boston, and then in the Battle of the North, Toronto, they've got their crowd. I think they got 3-0 smacked by the Ultra in that series. So there's a lot of questions. They're going to remain a threat because, as we know, Minnesota in the online atmosphere, that is going to be the topic moving into Major 4, regardless of how Minnesota plays. How are they going to play when it comes to LAN? How are they going to do when it comes down to that environment? I mean, these guys aren't like rookies. It's not as if we have questions on whether or not they have the ability to do it. I mean, what, like Attach has won. He's won a world championship before. The guy's been around for forever. Priestahh has been around for a long time. Havok's been around for an incredibly long time. You know, Standy, this is his second season, but one thing that we pride him on a lot is because of how I don't know, mature at times he can be in game. I don't know. It's a weird spot right now for the Røkkr to call. You know, did they have that peak in Major 3? Are they really going to have that same performance? Are they going to go 5-0? Are they going to play this well? I don't know, right? I have OpTic 1-0 after beating Boston in what should be a relatively easy series, I think. You know, I think matching up against Minnesota should be a great test for them, especially, as I said, in games 2 and 5, as well as in the swing game mode for Control, if it does go to a game 5. I think Minnesota just catches OpTic on one of their good days. I like OpTic more on a hard point. I think depending on the search destroys, they could definitely take one. And then when we talk about Control, I mean, the 3 previous times that these teams have played, OpTic has beat them in Control every single time. It hasn't always been a W for OpTic, but every time these teams have matched up against each other, they've taken that Control no matter what it is. So I think with that, I might say another 3-0. Like, am I getting kind of crazy here? Maybe Major 4. I don't know. Like, I came into this thinking like, okay, we're gonna have a lot of 3-1s, probably a lot of game 5s. Right now, I'm not like that. I've got 3 3-0s, 2 3-1s, and 1 game 5. Boston Breach LA Thieves? Could that go to a game 5? I don't know. Boston. I don't want to say it's a must win, but it absolutely is a must win. I don't know if I talked about Boston's schedule yet or not. But as I said, one of the more difficult schedules that we've got in the entirety of the CDL. They've got OpTic, they've got Thieves, then they've got Seattle, LAG, and Toronto. Obviously, the series versus Guerrillas is the one that you're eyeing up for sure if you're either of these two teams. But you're not looking forward to playing the Thieves. That is, especially if the Thieves are looking good, because you don't really know what to call when it comes down to the LA Thieves. I mean, currently in the 8th seed right now, they are 10 points away. At this moment, at this current moment, this will totally be different once this match does go down. But currently in the 8th seed, 10 points away from top 6, 10 points away from being in the 10th seed as well. Not a fun place to be, but I think if you are the Thieves, all things considered and given their schedule as well, I think it's doable without question. I think it's incredibly doable for the Thieves to remain in the top 8, considering they have Boston. They'll later face off against Atlanta the following day. And they've got Paris, Florida, and New York. I mean, you like their chances versus Boston. You like their chances versus Paris. The series versus Florida and New York, they'd probably take one of those. So I think at bare minimum, they go 2 and 3. And that very well could give you enough, especially if this Thieves team can get to a LAN environment where they do have the 3rd best average LAN placement out of anybody in the CDL, behind OpTic and Atlanta. Like I said, LA Thieves, what a weird tournament that they've had. Like, what a weird Major 3 just in general when it came down to the qualifiers. 3-0 wins or 3-0 losses. You know, they come in, they beat Minnesota in that first series. As I said, it comes down to the search destroys. They go on, get smacked around by Atlanta FaZe. I mean, just absolutely dominated. And then they play 45 minutes later versus OpTic Texas, and they 3-1 them. Kenny has the best series that he's had in all of Vanguard, and we're like, okay, LA Thieves, do they have like an actual chance of winning this now? And then I think they would later lose to like the Toronto Ultra or something like that. So just a weird situation for the LA Thieves overall. I think when it comes to the LA Thieves, just in general in this series, but also throughout the entirety of this major, you're going to continue to look at the SMGs. The ARs have seen the improvement. Octane and Drazah went from 0.8s to low, but still 1 KDs. They're in the positive department, which is great. So the ARs are seeing improvements. I think you like them more on paper, at least, than the Boston ARs. And then I think the SMGs very well are going to tell the closeness of this series. If we see Vivid and Nero, which this be Vivid's second series with Boston, if we see Vivid come out of the gates hot, he and Nero have one of those explosive series, this could be a moment where, hey, Boston wins the opening hard point, and we're instantly thinking, okay, Thieves and S&D, sometimes good, sometimes not. Maybe this could be a Boston W. Now, there is something to consider. This is a rematch from what I believe is recorded as the fastest match in Vanguard, probably one of the fastest series that we've seen in COD history, a 21-minute series between these teams in Major 3. LA Thieves 3-0'd Boston Breach. They 100-point clubbed them. They 6-0'd them in S&D, and they 3-0'd them in the Control. So, if you are Boston, you're definitely looking for the regain. You're looking for your revenge, without a doubt. I think given the strengths at times of Thieves, I don't think we're going to see the same thing. 3-0 losses, 3-0 wins. I think it's going to be more consistent for the Thieves boys. You know, despite them losing their very next match after beating OpTic, I love what I heard from Kenny during that series. He's like, listen, I been under a lot of pressure, and when it came down to that series versus OpTic Texas, I just didn't think, or rather I didn't think, I just did. I just did what I knew to do. I didn't overthink everything like I do, and it feels like every other series. Now, again, not something where you're like, okay, Kenny's back, cool. But I think that you like the performance that you saw from the Thieves. And in general, while their online is up and down, I feel like really you like them in this matchup, and you really like them moving forward, just given the fact that it feels like maybe things are starting to catch up with each other. It's still up in the air. It's still unknown in terms of, you know, what we're going to see from Thieves throughout the rest of the split, but I do like them more in this series. It is a rough go of it for Boston. I like Boston to probably take the S&D, maybe a Control, possibly, but other than that, I just don't see a way in which Boston really attacks this team except through the SMGs, which could be the point of emphasis when it comes down to this game. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think it's going to be enough to take down what at times is a great looking LAT. All right, let's advance to Sunday. Paris versus Seattle to kick off the day. It could be a spoiler game for Paris, considering that they're basically out of contention. I mean, by the time that this series takes place, it could be mathematically impossible for Paris to make a run. They only have 20 points right now, only one online victory throughout the entirety of this season. Could they make it 2? Who knows? But they're obviously off the top 12 placement at Major 3. They have the lowest seed right now in the overall standings. They did make a roster change, though. I almost forgot about that. Paris did make a roster change. They brought in Johnny from Challengers in place of John. I've heard a lot of good things about Johnny. It is weird that John is replaced by Johnny. I've kept hearing that like they had a pack-a-punch type of situation, which I think is kind of funny. Not funny if you're a fan of John, like I am. So I don't think it's funny. But no, I do like the move. I think the consistency with the SMGs was always the emphasis. It's been the talking point ever since Tom Gravity joined the lineup, right? The ARs plus 25, plus 20, SMGs negative 20, negative 25, negative 30. They're just not on the same track. It felt like it was the most obvious roster change out of probably any other thing in the CDL. And while it's been made, it's just too late. Like, it's obvious. It's too late. The move isn't going to make enough of noise to give Paris a real chance. Now, it wouldn't surprise me. I've heard that Paris have been looking great in scrimmages. I feel like they could be a spoiler team without a doubt. And maybe they catch Seattle on a very off day. Like maybe Seattle isn't aware of the recent improvements from Paris. Maybe, and understandably so. Like, you know, they still got the cigars. They still got the champagne flowing after the Major 3W. Maybe they're just like, oh yeah, Paris first week? Yeah. Do we scrimmage? I don't know. Maybe that's the mentality they have coming into this series, which is possible. But I am glad that Paris made the move. It's just I wish it would have come 2 months ago, 1 month ago at the very least. With that, Seattle, defending champions, right? Defending champions from Major 3. They currently hold the number 3 seed, so they're chilling. They're good. They're going to be making it in the top 8. There's no doubt about it. And what an incredible run it was. What an incredible run for Seattle. That winner's bracket match versus Atlanta FaZe. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch it. One of the best series that I have seen in COD history, and I do not say that often. I was on the desk, I want to say, for that series. I want to say I was. And I was absolutely mind blown, like totally mind blown by the comebacks that they were having. The control comeback was like a 5v16, a 4v16, something wild. With a 100-point comeback on the hard point, and they close them out in the search destroy. Then they go on to the final to beat Atlanta FaZe again, not just once but twice. The curse of Nikki D is still alive, even though Atlanta have beaten them a few times this year. Still prominent, I promise you. But it was just incredibly impressive out of the Seattle Surge team. I mean, they had their opportunity when it came down to Minnesota. You know, Mack obviously gets sick, funny enough, when they're facing off against Atlanta FaZe. They still sent him to like a game 5, round 10, something wild, despite him throwing up in the middle of a game at map number 1. They feel like they had their chance and they obviously missed it, and then they got the revenge, right? They get the revenge, a horrible pro-am, but they revived themselves. And after a lot of people calling for a roster change, talking about, okay, we've seen this team enough, now it's time to make the move, they held true to their guns, and it worked out great. And I'm very, very happy for this Seattle team. I love this group on paper. I do. I love the element of having the defined roles, right? You've got the rookie with the 3, or rather the veteran with the 3 rookie players, or 2 rookie players, 3 young players. God, I can't even get that out. 1 veteran with 3 young players. It's excellent. And Pred looked unbelievable. Looks like one of the best SMGs that we have in the game. Sib was fantastic. Mack continues to be one of the most slept on players that we have in the entirety of the game. And as we said, accuracy does it all behind the curtains. You don't see the impact that he truly has in the lineup unless you're able to check out the comms when we are going to those listen-ins. Now, they are the kings of the clutch. Does that eventually catch up with them? It is possible. It is possible that the kings of the clutch, right, the guys who come out of nowhere, you know, icy type of players. I know accuracy is number 1 in clutches this season. Sib is like number 5. It is possible that those things could start to catch up with them. But I don't know. It's just the numbers speak for themselves. At Major 3, their Search Destroy First Blood percentage was 67%. Their KD and SD was a 1.14. They had a control win record of an 80%. And overall, they had a 1.05 team KD, which is great, especially for Vanguard. I predict Seattle to win this series 3-1, but I think there could be some noise here. I think there's a chance, and I know I could sound crazy. I think there is a chance where Paris could surprise Seattle. Now, am I bold enough to call it? Absolutely not. But I think that there is a very good chance that Paris could at least sneak a few map victories in here. Again, when you least expect it, everyone's like, well, come on, Paris, you're making a move now. Like, you're bottom of the standings. You only got 20 points. Who really cares? You know, you're not going to make a run. You're not going to do anything to us. We're Seattle Surge. We just won the major. We're good. We're sitting in the number 3 seed. When you least expect it, Paris could strike. Who knows? Maybe they double their overall online victories in this game right here. Calling it right now. It's possible. Landon, are you gonna make the prediction? No, I'm not. But it could happen. We'll move on to another revenge game, right? At 3:30 p.m. These revenge games are excellent. We got LAG versus New York. We also have Minnesota versus Florida. Major Maniac versus Minnesota. This is going to be fun. This is going to be great. Major Maniac, previously a part of that Minnesota Røkkr team. A lot of drama, at least on the timeline, went down whenever Major Maniac was dropped from the team. A lot of people said it was not the right move to make, was not the right decision. It should have been Priestahh. It should have been Standy. Really anybody but Attach is what everybody kept talking about. Was the right move for Minnesota to make. Major Maniac was the guy who did have to bite the bullet and has been grinding in challengers. Just won the Toronto Open, which is great for him. He and 2Real are obviously now on this Florida team. Hot off of a series versus New York that I think could be very, very intense. I do have them losing to New York, but this is arguably, I don't know, probably the 2 most important matches of week 1. Debatable, you know, it's debatable. Are Florida's games, right? Versus New York versus Minnesota. It's basically what, the 9th, 10th, and 11th seed all battling it out when it comes down to these matchups. So I don't know. It's going to be fun to watch. Now, Minnesota are off of a series versus OpTic Texas. I have them getting 3-0'd. I think that it has the chance to be a grueler. You just really never know when it comes down to Minnesota, and really just when it comes down to Vanguard in general. Now, I do have it listed as a 3-0. However, it very much is in the air. This matchup to me right here is going to be in the air. I think if Minnesota do lose to OpTic Texas, which I have, this would hurt dramatically if you are the Røkkr, right? You're going into OpTic like, hey, let's just do our best. Let's try to beat them. But you're going into the Florida series like, okay, this is where you rebound. This is where we go 1-1. If they start off 0-2, that's not good, right? You don't want to start off 0-2 as the 9th seed. You very well could start to fall down the standings. I mean, you have London, Seattle, and Paris. You like them definitely versus Paris, depending on how London plays, which I think London actually could win this game versus Toronto. Things could start to shift. And then you have Seattle to worry about as well. So just a very tricky situation right now when it comes down to the Minnesota Røkkr. As I said, they're facing off against Florida, who are off their series versus New York. That to me is up in the air. I do like New York more. However, I feel like this week for Florida very well could be 2-0 or 0-2. I feel like that could be the case for this team if they do come out of the gates hot. Now, one thing that I really like about this series is it feels like this is obviously Major Maniac versus Florida, or excuse me, Major Maniac versus Minnesota. But this is also a primary talking point for this series is going to be about pace, because Florida just made a move in regards to their pace, right? They're trying to just be more consistent, whether they want to be faster or slower. They made a decision about that. The reason why Minnesota made a move in getting rid of Major Maniac was because of pace. They felt like they were too slow. It felt like they had too many guys trying to do the same role. So it's interesting. Minnesota drops Major for pace issues, yet Florida picks him up for pace improvements. That is a fun word. Pace improvements. The P's there are interesting. So it's going to be a fun talking point, because I am very eager to see the pace that Florida does play at. Whether it is a dramatic, improvement just in general, if they slow things down, which I think is more likely to happen, possibly. So I think it's going to be fun. Maybe they actually do speed up. Like, you don't really know what to expect from the Florida team, which I think could be one of their biggest assets. Now, one thing I also want to mention as well, this series is also between two teams who are tied currently in points. So if Florida does lose this series to New York, this series decides who becomes the 9th seed. So again, Florida, if they lose to New York, well, if Florida beats New York, they automatically claim the 9th seed for the moment. And then we talk about Minnesota versus OpTic, and then we talk about this game. If Florida does lose this game, which most people are going to predict, just based off of, standings and power rankings, etc., then this series versus Minnesota decides who will sit in that 9th seed moving forward. And that would also be a great start for Florida, given two very interesting games, 1-1, you'll take that. Minnesota 0-2 to start instantly puts pressure on them to have to start getting some victories. Now, also, both teams in their final 3 games, so Minnesota and Florida we're talking about, both teams in their final 3 games both play London and Paris, which are winnable. As I said, London, we don't know what to expect. Gizmo was back. What happens? Who knows? But it is interesting that both these teams are going to be playing two of the same 3 teams. I know it's kind of a weird explanation, but the last three matchups that both these teams have, 2 of those teams are the same. One of them is Paris, where you like them to win, and London. Again, London, Paris, they could turn up. Who knows? But I think that those historically, or at least on paper, are winnable. So it's going to be fun, because it feels like Minnesota and Florida are probably going to follow the same sheet of music for the most part. So whoever wins this could screw the other out of getting a winner's bracket position. I mean, that could be massive. Let's say that Florida beats Minnesota here. They start off 0-2. Florida starts off 1-1. They play the same teams. Let's say they have the same trajectory. Let's say they both beat London and Paris. Or maybe they go 1-1. It's going to be fun, because like I said, both these teams have a very similar trajectory once this series concludes, and arguably will have a very similar record, but it could come down to who wins this one. And I think it goes to a game 5. I do. I think this one's going to go down to a game 5, and I am saying that Major Maniac is going to surprise us all. I think that It's Never Chalked is going to be more big than ever. T-shirts are going to be printed like they've never been printed before. I'm going to be wearing mine on broadcast. It's going to be a great time. I'm going to be so interested to watch this game because I think this one is massive just in general when it comes down to the way the standings sit. And really just in general when it comes down to a revenge game. I have my eyes on this one. I have my eyes on this one, pretty much all of them. But I think the Florida do take it. I think they get the revenge, and Minnesota start off 0-2 without a doubt. One of the crazier predictions that I have got right now. Is it going to happen? I don't know. It's possible. We'll move on to our final game. Another Game Fuel marquee match. My pen is flying everywhere. Atlanta FaZe versus the LA Thieves. Another second place finish for Atlanta FaZe. It's hard, right? And I got some flack because I still put Atlanta FaZe in the S tier for a reason. Because I feel like they've been able to do something that nobody else has been able to do, which is to play consistent in Vanguard. I know they have the one placement when it came down to Pro-Am, but at the same point, it's still single elimination. But the fact that they've been able to be consistently second is impressive. I do, and I still stand by it. I think they still are an S tier team. And it's just, I do wonder though, the mentality of Atlanta FaZe. I feel like nobody's really talked about this enough. Like from a mentality perspective, I've seen a lot of people talk about this, like, oh, you know what? They're going to be very happy that they finished, top 2 all season. I don't think so. Like, okay, I may have spoken out of term. I'm not saying that nobody's saying that they are thrilled that they have finished second place every time. They've gotten a second place trophy, all that stuff. No, of course not. They're not happy getting silver. However, I think that there's something going on, right? Because if Atlanta FaZe go to another Major 4 final, and I know I'm speaking ahead, if they go to another Major final, right? They go to Major 4, they make it there. Imagine like the pressure. Imagine the pressure of like the community on their backs being like, are they going to lose 4? I mean, imagine the embarrassment that would come from that. The team who dominated everybody last year in Cold War, they really can't get it done. They can't get it done in the final series, the one series that matters where we all predict them to win every time, yet they always come up short. Right? I mean, it's an interesting situation to be in. And I wonder mentality-wise if there's something there or if it's just 3 unfortunate series. Is it really 3 unfortunate series? LAG, Seattle, OpTic Texas? Like, is it really that? Or is there something greater going on? I don't know. It just is something interesting. It's something that I really want to focus on for Atlanta FaZe. Now they have the number 1 seed. They're chilling. They're good. Something to think about. OpTic could catch them when it comes down to that number 1 seed. But ultimately, if you're Atlanta, you're still feeling confident. You're still feeling good right now, but your overall position. And I talked to Jay about this most recently, and I totally agree with him. This is the time for Atlanta FaZe to work on map pools. It's the time to work on game modes. It's the time to work on pretty much everything that you are really wanting to work on. Maybe the best of 9s, the things that you've learned from. I mean, that's a perfect example. Obviously, they've lost 3 best of 9s. That could be a map pool conversation. You look back at all of those series and you say, okay, what have we struggled with? Is it hardpoint? Is it search and destroy? What really is the primary culprit of our shortcomings? On the other side for LA Thieves, they're off of the win versus Boston Breach, in my opinion. I think that one is a 3-1 or 3-0. Can they start 2-0? I mean, is there really like a conversation to have here? Like, are LA Thieves going to play up to their competition? Are they going to be able to beat the Atlanta FaZe? I have them beating the Atlanta FaZe. I know. I'm crazy. I'm crazy right now. I literally just said Atlanta FaZe is an S tier, and I'm totally contradicting myself by having them lose to the LA Thieves at the end of Sunday. Now, I'm just going to type this in very, very calmly and very quickly. I know that sounds very contradictory, but I think that Atlanta FaZe, this is going to be their first series. They are off of a loss. I think there is something. Okay, let me just back up really quick. Atlanta FaZe, in my opinion, deserve to be an S tier. I don't care if they come into this series and end up losing. I still have them in the S tier. But I think that there is, because this the title itself, I think that they deserve to be in the S tier, not because of what I think is coming, aka this loss, but because of just what they've accomplished this season. So I will say that, lay that to rest. At the same time, I advance into this series because I think that there is something greater going on in the Atlanta FaZe camp, right? We all remember Major 3 for the Atlanta FaZe was by no means perfect, right? I mean, look at the performances that they had when it came down to it. Or wait, am I thinking Major 2? I might be thinking Major 2. I forget. Or maybe I'm thinking of... No, I'm thinking of Major 2. I apologize. Or wait, no, it was Major 3. I'm not crazy. I was looking at my my notes here, right? They did have that 3-0 loss versus Minnesota. They did lose to OpTic Texas, and they had that crazy moment. I knew I wasn't losing it yet. Then they had the crazy Bocage loss to LAG, which came out of absolutely nowhere. So I think that from a map pool perspective, from Atlanta trying to think about the future, that could come into play. I think there could be something a little wrong with Atlanta FaZe that they have to work out, that they've yet to truly identify. And I think that LA Thieves just in general are wild, and you just don't really know how to call them right now. So I think that LAT have a great opportunity for a warm-up game to figure things out, and I like when they play up to their competition when it does come down to the big moments. Now, again, Landon, you're crazy. Not only for the prediction, but you literally casted over them getting stomped versus Atlanta FaZe at Major 3. I know I did. I know that I did. It was a smack show. Nobody played well. I'm still going for it. I don't know. It's definitely one of the more wild predictions that I've had this season, but I'm going to stick by it. I do. I think the LA Thieves start off this week 2-0, and they're sitting pretty. Call me crazy. I definitely am for that prediction, but we're going to lock it in. We're going to lock it in. So one thing that I want to do, right? We just hit the hour mark right on the dot for me. One thing that I want to do is take a quick look at the way that the standings will be appearing, if you will, if my predictions are accurate. So I'm going to put that on screen right now. If my predictions are true, and I go perfect 10 for 10, this is the way that the standings would shape up. So Atlanta, OpTic, Seattle, those stay the same. Toronto will overtake London in the 4th versus 5th seed. LAT, yeah, they go from the 8th seed all the way up to the 6th seed. Boston start to fall a spot. LAG fall a spot. Florida overtake Minnesota. And now take a look at what happens. Take a look at what feels so much more feasible for the New York Subliners if we see some controversy happen with what I have listed as 7 through 10. Boston, LAG, Florida, Minnesota. Anything that is competitive, right? As long as New York is winning the matches that they're supposed to, they're going to have to win some gauntlet games. It's possible, folks. I'm telling you, it is absolutely possible. It's the truth. It could happen where New York start to make a run. But as I said, 2-0, you have to win both of these games if you're New York. There's no question about it. You have to win both of these games to stand a chance. And as I said, you look at where they sit right now. I mean, what? They're 30 points away from Florida. They're 20 points away right now from Minnesota. That is ground that can be gained upon. That is ground that can be gained upon. It is fun times. It is fun times indeed. And obviously, I thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of LandO's Lock-Ins. I told you I was going to surprise you a little bit, but you had to wait a little while before we got there. I had to wait until Sunday before I came out with some of the more wilder series. But I think for me, guys, it's going to be a great qualifier. I really can't express this enough. I am so excited for this split. I think Major 4 is going to be our craziest one that we have had yet. And I don't just say that to sell it to you. I say that because I truly think it. I really do think that these matches are going to be impeccable. As I said, we have 6, if not 7 bubble teams right now who are all trying to get in the top 8. It's going to be madness, trying to fit everybody into what is a very, very slender list right now. So I'm eager to see exactly how these games go down. If you agree with my predictions, let me know. If you disagree, I want you to let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for the support on this series. We're still going to try to get these uploaded as soon as possible. I know this one's coming out a little bit late, so I apologize for that. And I need to stop talking so I can edit and upload this as soon as possible. But I thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will catch you guys all for the matches this week and for LandO's Lock-Ins moving into week number 2. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you all on broadcast and next week for another edition. Take it easy.